Greetings and salutations, travelers. Welcome back to the Inn of Planar Crossroads. And as always, welcome back to our house specials, our series where we are going to be discussing the different things that we're coming up with and the different projects that we're doing here at the Inn of Planar Crossroads. And specifically, this time we're talking about our our Adventure Academia series, and it's coming towards its end on this semester. So our Adventure Academia series is getting pretty close to wrapping up on what it's doing. I've got this next thing, the new thing I'm going to show you this time, and then the time after that, and it'll be done for this spring. So I think that is pretty interesting to see coming up, and having to figure out how to have all of the stuff work out, and all of the things for that kind of fit together well in the end, with such a time limit. But that's not what we're talking about right now. First, let's do announcements, which we always do. They're always less than 5 minutes, and we have chapters in the description if you want to skip it. So, as far as announcements, still working on the logos and such like that for the Inn of Planar Crossroads webpage, but Lord willing, like I said, I'm trying to get those done either by the end of April and have things set up, or pretty close. Because of having to do these as well as other things with real life and such, that's a bit more tricky. So it may be a May thing instead of an April thing, but that's okay. The goal is still there to get that done, and progress is being made toward it. That's really the only main thing I have for this particular thing. Later this year, we're going to be doing something special because we'll be getting pretty close to our 1,000 subscribers thing, so we're going to do something special for that, hopefully. But other than that, I don't have anything new or different, so let's get into this particular one. So we're starting with reflections for episode 5, Down Through the Ebon Hue. As always, flavor text was done last time for Down Through the Ebon Hue. As far as a reflection on it, this one I used to build out, Wilhelm's point of view a little bit again, and because of, like I said last time, because of the way in which we're framing it, Wilhelm was the main focus, but there was also this crossing over with other people's perspectives that started to happen, and that's fine for this particular way of doing it. But we discussed how they went down. We discussed, the flavor text talked about what happened at the front of the cave and stuff. And because of how fairly similar things went, it wasn't too crazy that they were able to sync up well enough. There wasn't a whole lot of divergent choices this last time, but it was able to stay pretty well synced up. Kids thought it was fine. Didn't get a whole lot of hiccups. And they thought he was going to start poisoned this last time, but he actually started fatigued. I did go with that. We'll use that to talk about that and branch into the encounter portion, which they came to a portion of the cave, and they found that little chamber that was off to the side where the digging was had actually been done, and this is where most of the concentrated effort was, because this is closest to where another shaft would lead up from across the other side. And this worked out well as far as the narrative. As far as the encounter for the kids, I think they did well. They started in really strong, and the encounter setup was good enough. You guys, like I said, you guys get to see if you follow us on Facebook, not Facebook, but if you follow us on YouTube and you actually look at our community tab and such like that, and our social medias sometimes will get to see it too. The board, the picture of the board at the start of the class with the older kids. It has more questions in it and stuff. The introduction of the new goblin type went over smoothly, and it did have its own style of attack and stuff. So it went well on that portion. As far as the actual battle went, the kids did pretty well on, like I said, taking things on head on. And I did something that I wanted to make... Alright, sorry about that, my phone went off. Let me get my head back to where it was. Okay, so the kids, as far as strategy and everything, seemed to go pretty smoothly. Something I did this time was I did not... we always roll initiative at the first part of the game, the session. That's the word I was looking for. The session. And this is something I've actually incorporated into other games for adults that I run, is just rolling initiative at the beginning of each session so that it's done and it's over with. That's how I usually do it anyway. So we've got those up there, and those get on the board. And it was fitting this time because there was no sneak attack round or anything like that. Those goblins were watching for them, and they were watching for the goblins, so it was kind of an even footing thing. As far as for the kids and how they decided to handle what to do first, they did focus most of their fire on the fungus goblin because they knew the fungus goblin was going to need to be the one to take care of things. Was going to need to be the one they could take care of and know what it could do. Like, they knew it could hawk loogies and poison you. So that is something that they did. The Nightshade Goblin, which they didn't know its name until later, the Nightshade Goblin is the one with the flowers on its cloak, the Nightshade flowers, basically. And it was going to be one that was more of a spellcaster and had control of the beasts for the most part, and that worked out all right. The beasts, the way I had them release in the slight divergence this time was that for the older kids, they got the fungus goblin to explode, and it did do a little damage to the goblin beside it, the Nightshade Goblin, but not a whole lot. They rolled for it, and I said, all right, you can have some damage then. So they got high enough on the percentile dice for the splash damage of it exploding. But what I had that do is, because that was taken care of so quickly, I had the rocks fall from above off of the ceiling, maybe like some stalactites or something. And they fell down and busted some of the cage open for some of the burrowing beasts, and so that gave a narrative reason for the burrowing beasts to get out. The difference between that happening with the older kids and then the younger kids is I already knew that those beasts were going to be released, because the Nightshade Goblin, he was the one in control of the corrals in the first place. He would control it with his magics from his staff and such. So that's what he did in the kids game, is he released one. And I didn't release all of them at once because that would be a bit much, I think, but the otherwise, if I didn't release any, they were not going to focus on anything other than the mages, the magic users back, like the goblins, and that wouldn't have been good. So there was a bit of a divergence there, a bit of a divergence on what the older and younger kids did as far as positioning, but all in all, basically the same. So that was pretty good for narrative cohesion. Something that I want to point out that I did also, that was something I've done, something that I am probably going to continue to do with these type of things, especially into this next one, because it still continues combat. I'm going to continue that narrative in. The kids were able to to be so quick with their combat because I did not let them not be quick. I told them, hey, you've only got so much time. If you want to see the end of this combat before the bell rings, you guys have got to work together and get a consensus going. And because most of the time we do like a democratic vote, who wants this, who wants this, after they submit some ideas, or after some ideas have been submitted in general, then the question is, do you want this or this? This or this? And that usually works out well. And they've gotten used to that enough that I don't have to shush them to get them to focus on the vote most of the time. The younger kids are still having to get shushed to focus on the vote, but that's because they're younger kids, and that's understandable. I think that that'll be something we continue definitely into this one, and you will see that in the flavor text and what I'm kind of planning to do. Let me see. We're a little ways in. I'm trying to keep these like 20, no more than 30 minutes if I can, because it's just a long time. So we're going to have to end that there. I am going to do a end of... There is a plan to do an end of semester kind of, hey, you guys did this and this and this. Now, here's how the behind the scenes part of it worked, and what inspired this part of it, or how I decided to do this or that at the end, a full on reflection at the end. And that should be useful for building out, hopefully, what comes next in the next semester, and also being able to rework this for a more broad, hey, this and this happened, you can use this in your game thing, like a actual PDF for people. So, that all said, let's get into the flavor text for the next portion. So it would be episode 6, I believe. Yeah, episode 6. Dangers in the Deeps. And I really was conflicted on what to do with this particular one, so I'll explain that in a minute. Let's get the flavor text out of the way for episode 6, Dangers in the Deeps. Hildagarde hated being underground. While the darkness of the caves wasn't exactly comforting, the thing that really upset her was how close and tight the corridors felt. Wilhelm's stories had helped get her mind off of this, but these fears had assaulted her once again when they had to go single file down the side tunnel that led to the dig site. Remigius had led the way, with Wilhelm following behind. He almost had to crawl through. He almost had to crawl to get through. Maximillian followed, and Hildagarde giggled softly to herself. Seeing the large minotaur followed by this much smaller possum was quite comical. She thanked the light for the brief levity to help her make it through the shaft. When they had reached the chamber where the digging was taking place, the goblins there were expecting them. The battle had begun immediately. Wilhelm used his bow to get some shots in while advancing on the moss and nightshade goblin on the shelf. Remigius used the enchanted smoke from his pipe to conceal himself in order to gain advantage over the burrowing beasts that the nightshade goblin began releasing from their corral. Maximillian employed his usual fire-based tactics to good effect. Finally, Hildagarde had caused the sins of the goblins to blind them to their surroundings. The nightshade goblin refused to succumb to the light's reproaches, but the fungus goblin was not so lucky. Surprisingly, despite this, the fungus goblin was able to successfully hit Wilhelm with a foul expectoration. Hildagarde could see that the poison was taking its effect on Wilhelm. He powered through, however, and with Remigius and Maximilian's aid, the fungus goblin, along with one of the burrowing beasts, had been dealt with. Even after the nightshade goblin released the other beasts, Hildagarde thought that things were going in her fellow's favor. Then, The damaged nightshade goblin cracked a wicked smile, and a chill ran down her spine. Boom, boom. So, with this one, still building things out. In this characterization, it did change something about Hildagarde. Before Hildagarde, let me show you. Before Hildagarde had, I think it was naive or zealous. It was zealous that I changed. She had zealous as her flaw up here, along with honest. I changed that to claustrophobic. I thought that fit better for for how my mind characterized her while she was doing her actual stuff in the story. And so that worked out pretty good. I'm glad that worked out. And I'm glad to see the characters change after I've made them, because that's what happened with Wilhelm also. He changed to get fainting disease instead of socially awkward, and things along those lines. I kept uncoordinated instead of the other because he obviously is not a body that's not quite his own. But fainting disease works, and claustrophobic works for her. It makes sense. She's always lived in the city of bronze and has never had to be away from it. And the temple is an open place. So she's never had to deal with that. And now she's uncomfortable in these tight places. I thought that was good for a characterization development for her. And so we switched that around. All right, so back up here. Another thing to point out is Remigius and this enchanted smoke thing. So I wasn't sure how to flavor his he has influence to do, and we'll go back up to his thing also. He has influence put into in order to have, what was it? Now you see me, now you don't. Concealment, which used to be invisibility, but in this revision it's a concealment. It's on the webpage if you want to look. He has concealment 4 through his influence, and that allows the evoker to conceal one sensory element and such like that. So he goes for sight usually. +1 guard against attackers that can't detect the target. -1 to guard for enemies that can't detect the target. And so it makes guard go up for him. I kind of just let it go ahead and be a disadvantage because we're still working out all the mechanics of that, and it makes more sense for the kids because they are still getting used to it. None of them are doing, to my knowledge, none of them are going on to the web page and actually looking up rules. So they're depending completely on me for it. You GMs know what I'm talking about, right? You LMs, you know, players don't always look up the rules, even when those rules apply to them and their favorite characters. So I would not be so lenient, not be so flippant about it if this was a real group. But this is a class-based, this is a thing we're doing in class to get better at stuff. So especially with the older group, like in the fall session, the more they are exposed to the system, the more I'm going to say, okay, we're going to run closer to the rules as we go on. And this has been something I'm not sure I've mentioned last time, but it has definitely been something that I've been seeing, that the further we go on, the further I veer towards the rules as they're written, rather than just trying to get them narratively through stuff. Because one, this older group needs to branch out more on its math to build up what I'm hoping to do with them, which is improve their arithmetic as well as their problem solving. So I'll get into that a little bit later, probably in our larger planned for next semester talk or something like that. But just to give a short preview of that, I may not do a younger class next year. I may keep the older class and run a different class because I have different classes that I run. And I don't want to just do this one because the kids it might not be worth it for the kids to just keep on doing the same thing. But anyway, so this built out some of that. enforce the name of the Nightshade Goblin and stuff, and or at least what it's called. And these specific things, and this was brought up in a comment before. Shout out to Dan from Avenue Studios, bringing up stuff in the comments. I will have to rewrite this for a full-on release, because Hildagarde and Maximillian might not get, Wilhelm might not get hit with a expectoration in somebody else's game, and Hildagarde might not use the blinding, and might use something else depending on how tightly they're running their hit points and how they're running through the game, and if they went through the whole cavern portion. That'll be different. This will be rewritten a bit, but all of it will have to be rewritten a bit. But for the main part, this is what we're sticking with right now, so that we can getting things on paper is better than not doing it and trying to get it perfect. So I'll do that in my final reflection. I'll give you guys that right this video. But as far as this particular flavor text, I'm hoping that not only did it flesh out Hildagarde a little bit, but the others are starting to get built up on. The Remigius using his enchanted smoke from his pipe. We learned not last time, but the time before, I believe, that he had a smokehouse where he actually sold like different tobaccos and different things like that. So that's what he did as his trying to become legit. So we see that getting out of his criminal life, and how he's actually got special stuff there, and how he's using that, and that's where his concealment influence type stuff is coming from. So that's what I've got for this one. Hopefully that builds out a bit. Okay, I'm trying to watch my time. Hopefully that builds out well enough. Let me see, the encounter portion. So there's less flavor text this time, but that's because we are continuing. It's kind of like the other one with Thorn Goblin. We're continuing. This is going to be not a boss monster in the rules sense of the game, but it's a boss monster in the sense of the narrative. This is a boss monster because you'll see as we go on. So, encounter flavor text for episode 6. The flow of the battle changed quickly. The Nightshade Goblin let out an evil laugh and gripped the head of its staff. There was a pause in the action. Maximillian and Hildagarde looked at each other, and then around the room. Something drew their attention to the floor beneath them. It was vines. The dirt was just caked over a mass of vines, just like the cages that the burrowing beast had been in. Then a realization dawned on them both. Before the two mages could warn their friends, the goblin crushed the head of its gnarled staff. The floor quaked for the briefest of seconds, before the vines writhed and thorns erupted up, piercing up through the remaining burrowing beasts and sprite that had made up the fungus goblin. The now thorny vines began glowing. The magic flowed through the vines, and as the magic and life drained from the skewered creatures and flowed into the Nightshade Goblin, it grew, and even Wilhelm was surprised by this new strategy. A magical wave burst forth from the goblin. They shielded their faces. When they looked again to the monster, it had swollen from the normal 2-foot height of a goblin to be even taller than Wilhelm's 7-foot frame. This new thing was pulsating with the sickly green energies of Grum's magics. Its body seemed to twitch and jerk. A wide, toothy grin spread across its face. Remigius took a deep draw from his pipe. Wilhelm gripped his claymore. Maximillian clutched his staff, and Hildagarde readied her shield. It looked like this battle had gotten even tougher. But the resolve was unwavering. They had to defeat this abominable thing to protect the Centerland. And there we go. So that is this one, and the encounter text. So the encounter flavor text is something that I was up in the air about. I was up in the air about how to do this. I was thinking, well, maybe I'd have them fall down, and then next session I would bring them back around and they would be able to take things out then. But that didn't seem very narratively useful. This will probably be the toughest battle they face in the game in this semester. And then I'm thinking that next time is going to be more like challenge events to get out, or perhaps there's going to be some swarming happening with the creatures or different things like that. But this is probably going to be the creature that they face the most in battle, the most battled portion, but in the toughest thing to battle. But I don't think that it's going to affect them. I don't think next time's going to be so battle focused. There may be some different things that need rolled. I'm not sure. I'm really not sure how it's going to end. Well, I know how I'm going to sew it all, get it all tied up in a neat bow at the end, and kind of release some kind of flavor text for them to have. But other than that, I don't think that it's going to be something that they are going to be able to top off. Like get above, like this. Oh, this is even harder than that. Not this semester. This semester, this will be the big baddie, the big thing to fight at the end. And then next time, I'm probably going to try with some, like I said, things that are not just combat, to try and give them some roles to do or things to decide or stuff like that. Like I said, not for sure. I think that this time we'll be branching right into that. There's not a lot to talk about other than that. I do have some things that I'm going to do with it as a mechanical portion. Like I know that I'm going to have it have more than one initiative. I'm probably going to give it 3 initiatives, and it's going to do different things on those initiatives, because this creature is going to be, this is a boss. And usually you have boss actions, but I'm not going to do that whole thing necessarily. I'm going to have it basically as if they were facing 3 enemies, but it's one that they're kind of sharing this whole pool. Because that's kind of what's happening with the creature. That's kind of why I went this way instead of them falling down, having to trudge through a dungeon and then get back to a point where they face this final goblin thing. This way, they have a single thing that they're fighting, and then it can lead into something else, and it won't be too easy for them, because it's going to have 3 initiatives, because it's absorbed at least 3 other creatures. The sprite itself, like this is the first time that they're going to have an actual death of something in the game. It's here at the end, and it's in an important narrative place. Like when the Nightshade Goblin used that magic to actually skewer that sprite, it killed the sprite. That fairy's dead. And its whole thing went to dust. It was absorbed as a whole into that thing. It wasn't absorbed alive. It was used as material. Its essence was used as material to bulk out this goblin. And it makes this goblin more dangerous in that sense. The thing that I'm going to hopefully be able to do is see, this will let me gauge just how much of a time they can take. I don't think anybody's going to die. I don't think Remigius is going to die, or anybody, or Hildagarde, or anything like that. But I want to beat them up. I want to make them feel like they're earning this, because I want them to. I want them to earn it. I want them to think strategically. What are you going to do? How are you going to do it? And you can't do that without risk. With no drama, you don't have a story. So They're narratively helping tell the story. And that's kind of my reflections for this. We're a little over probably from... I've got to cut some stuff out, but we're a little over probably. I don't know that there'll be a lot of bloopers this time, because I don't want to make it too long. But anyway, I think that's it for now. As always, have a great day. God bless, and enjoy. Bye.
This content was made possible by travelers and viewers like you. Thank you.
Something that I wanted to make... Sorry. Mainly the fungus goblin and such were there to have... let me just start that part over. Go back to where the thing interrupted me. When they had reached the chamber, there where the... Blah. Blah. That'll be a fun word to explain to them. Expectoration. Kind of painting myself into a corner here with this. Not sure what I'm going to challenge them with next time. Hopefully something other than combat, but I'm not sure. Probably getting out of the cave. I might have a collapse or something like that. Maybe some loss, some magical burst or something like that.